Hi, in this video we're going to look at the topic of fractions, decimals and percentages and how we can convert between all three. This is a foundation topic at GCSE, but it's something that you really need to know at higher as well as one of your core skills. So if you're not sure and you're a higher candidate, it's also a useful video just to brush up on how to do it. As ever, if you want more information, you can follow me on Twitter at Mr_G_Walton or our school account at Tupton Maths. So in this video, what we're going to look at is looking at converting between fractions, decimals and percentages. We're going to look at ordering fractions, decimals and percentages. So when you've got those questions with a mixture of all three and you need to order them smallest to largest. And we're going to look at some functional style questions as well that involve all these three things, fractions, decimals and percents. Okay, let's start off looking at this example where we've got a mixture of things going on. We've got a fractions column, a decimals column, and a percentages column. Now, the key to this is to try and get all the things the same. So if we're trying to order something, we want them all to be in either percentages or decimals or fractions with a common denominator, the bottom number being the same, so that we're able to do something with them. It's easier if all your fractions are different and you know what the decimal or percentage equivalent is to compare these. Percentages, I'm sure you know, are always out of 100. So a percentage here we can say is out of 100, which starts to look a little bit like a fraction. Notice we've got 100 on the bottom, a line, and then something at the top. So this 60% here, I could write as 60 out of 100. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, but the fraction's 3/5. Well, there is a link between these two things, and in some of the other videos we've looked at converting fractions. So just as a quick aside, if we see how this is the same, 60 out of 100, I'm turning it into something over 5. What can I do to get from 100 to 5? Well, I'm going to divide it by something to get to 5. Now 20 times 5 is 100, so I can do 100 divided by 20 and get to 5. I can do the same at the top, divide by 20. Doing the same thing to the top and bottom keeps it equivalent, so we're maintaining the equivalence of these things. How many 20s go into 60? 3. So you'll notice that 60 out of 100 is exactly the same as 3/5. And so that's why these two things here are already linked up. Now the bit in the middle is the decimal, and this is where again we need to think quite carefully about our number line. So I'm just going to start off with our units, our decimal point, and then after this we have tenths, so 1 out of 10, and then we have hundredths. After that we've got thousandths and so on. So if I've got a decimal, or if I've got a percentage here, 60, we said that that's the same as 60 out of 100, or 60 hundredths. Let's see how I would write 60 in my hundredths column then. Well, it's the same as having 60 like this in my hundredths. So I've got 60 down here, 6/10 and none in my hundredths. And this can be a little bit confusing because I said I wanted 60 in my hundredths column. Well, if I had 60 here, I've got 2 digits there, and you might also be able to spot that 6/10 is the same as 60 over 100. Okay, so we have to be really careful when we're doing these. I'll fill this one in and we'll see if we can make sense of it. So 0.6 here, or you might think 0.60 if you want to think of it that way. Let's look at the next line down. 0.57 or 57 hundredths. Let's write that out. 57 hundredths. Okay, now when we want our fraction, ideally we want it in its simplest form. That means, can we cancel it down anywhere? Well, the only number that I can think of that goes into 57 is 3 or 19. Well, 3 and 19 definitely don't go into 100, so I don't think that's going to cancel down at all. So I'm just going to write it as 57 over 100. It's a fraction, it's there, and it meets the same criteria as all the other things. We've got 57 over 100, or 0.57, or 57%. Remember, the word percent meant out of 100. Right, let's look at the last one then. Here we've got 7 in our tenths column, so 0.7, 7 in our tenths column. So as a fraction, this is 7 tenths. And as a percentage, well, this one here was 0.6, and that was 60%. So 0.7 is the same as, and I'm just going to write it down here, up here, so 7 out of 10 is the same as, now ideally what we want it out of 100. So we could times this bit by 10, keeping it equivalent, times the top by 10, and we get 70. 70 out of 100, in this case, or 70%. Okay, so this idea of converting between fractions, decimals and percents, what we really want to do is to have our numbers on the left hand side of our fractions here. You want the bottom number to be out of 100 to make it easier for ourselves. So if we were converting 3/5 into a percentage, we would think about it this way, like I've done up here. What can I do to get from a 5 to 100? In this case it would be times by 20. What can I do to get from a 3? Well, times by 20 again, because whatever I did at the bottom I do at the top, to get 60. So all these are now equivalent to each other. They've all got something in common, and that's that we could write every single one of these in terms of hundredths. The fraction we can, the decimal we can think of our number line, and the percentage is already out of 100. Okay, let's move on, see if we can do some more of these. In this example, it says these are Tanya's results for German tests. We've got vocabulary, writing, speaking, listening and reading. They're all in different formats though. Some are in fractions, some are in decimals. Some are in percentages. There are no decimals here. So we need to have a go at converting them all into something that's the same. Now we've got 2 of these that are percentages, and it's easier, from my point of view, I think it's easier to convert a fraction into a percentage so that we can then look at ordering them highest first. So let's do the first one. This vocabulary, 15 out of 20. If I'm converting it into a percentage, I need it out of 100. What can I do to multiply 20 by something to get to 100? Well, 5 20s are 100. So whatever I'm doing to the bottom of my fraction here, I'm going to have to do the same to the top. So 15 times 5 is 75. So this fraction, 15 over 20, is equivalent to 75 over 100. Why have I written it over 100? Well, if it's over 100, it's very easy for me then to say that this is 75%. So I've converted from a fraction to a percentage. Okay, let's do the same with 3/5. I'm going to write it over 100. What can I do to convert a 5 into 100? Well, I can times by 20. So let's think about this, timesing by 20. If I'm timesing the bottom by 20, I have to times the top by 20. This is 60. And therefore the speaking percentage is 60%. We've got one more to do. We've got the listening one. Again, I'm going to write it over 100. what can I times 10 by to get to 100? I can times it by 10. I do the same to the top, which is 70, which means that my percentage is 70%. Now it's a case of looking at all of these different percentages. Vocabulary, 75%. Writing, 63. Speaking, 60. Listening, 70%. Reading, 55. So putting these results in order, highest first, we can do one of two things. We could either write the words, or we could write the values that it said here. I'm just going to write down the first letter of the words, but you should always write the full thing. I'm only doing that because of space on the screen. So the highest first, okay, so I've read the question again carefully. Highest first would be this one, vocabulary. So that one's first. Next highest would be listening. So L. Next highest, I'm just looking across. So 63 is the next one. So writing next. Then 60, which is speaking. Then last of all 55%, which is reading. So in terms of highest, we've got vocabulary, lowest being reading, and it's much easier to compare now they're all in the same format. I've turned them all into percentages. Okay, let's have a look at this example then. This is now starting to look at a little bit more detail about one of these sort of more wordy questions where we're going to have to do a little bit of extra work. It says a cruise ship has 850 cabins. 60% of the cabins have a sea view. Of those cabins with a sea view, 2/5 have a balcony. How many cabins have both a sea view and a balcony? Now, this one's slightly different. We've got percentages in here. We've got a fraction in here. How are we going to go about working this out? Well, this time we've been asked to do something with these numbers. We're going to have to work out 60% of an amount. Now, this is slightly different to what we've been doing so far, but you can see we've got fractions and decimals here. Let's think about how we're going to work out 60% of something. Well, 10% is when you divide by 10. So 60%, we're going to do 850 divided by 10, which is 85. So 10% is 85. I want to know what 60% is. Well, that's 6 lots of 10%. So 60% is going to be 85 times 6. 85 multiplied by 6. I'm just going to do this very quickly. 5 times 6 is 30. 80 times 6 would be 480. Add the two things together, we're going to get 510. Now, it then says, of those cabins with a sea view, 2/5 have a balcony. So we're now applying a slightly different skill. We want to know what 2/5 of 510 is. And again, we could have converted this into a percentage if you prefer, or we can just go ahead and work it out. I'm going to turn it into a percentage just because that's what we've been doing, and it's quite easy to work out percentages. So if we're turning this into a percentage, 2/5 is the same as something over 100. What can I times 5 by? 20. Do the same on the top. So we're going to work out 40% now of 510. 10% would be 51. 40%, which is what this is telling us, 40 out of 100. So 40% is 4 lots of 51, which is going to give me 204. So equals 204. Now, we didn't have to do it that way, and you may well know alternative ways of working out a fraction of an amount, but because this video we're looking at comparing, not comparing, but changing fractions, decimals and percents into the same thing, I thought it'd be an interesting way to look at this, because you might be better off working out percentages. It's something you might be really strong at, or alternatively, you might prefer when you can find a fraction of an amount. Either way, having the skills to be able to convert strongly between a fraction and a percentage and the other way is going to hold you in good stead. Okay, this is one for you to have a go at. This is a bit of a silly question, but I'd like you to work out which of these parrots has the best trick accuracy. And I actually want you to order these, starting with the worst one. You'll notice that this is a mixture of decimals, percents, and fractions. So pause the video, have a go, and let me know how you got on. Okay, so I'm hoping that you've put all these into something that's equivalent. Personally, again, I'm going to look for percentages. Let's look at John Parrot first. Here he is on his little bike. John Parrot was 0.7. That's 7 in the tenths column of our decimals, which is the same as 70%. Or from here you might have gone to 7 over 100. 70 over 100. And that's fine, we've got the same thing. So John Parrot, 70%. Peter Parrot, right 3/4 of the time. So 3/4, let's turn that into something as a percentage. You might know this already as 75%, but let's see if we can work out why. Put it over 100. 4 times 25 is 100. 3 times 25, doing the same to the top, gives me 75 out of 100. So Peter Parrot is 75% accurate. Nelson Parrot, let's look at him. He's ringing his bell down here. We've got 17 over 20. Turn it into something over 100. Times by 5. Do the same to the top. 5 times 7 is 35. And 5 times 10 is 50. Add the two things up. We get 85 out of 100. Or 85% for Nelson. And finally, Polly Parrot it tells us already 65% of the time. So if we're putting these in order, we want first of all Polly. Then who's going to be next? John. And then Peter. And finally Nelson. Okay. So at the end of all these videos we have a look at taking some notes. When we're converting fractions, decimals and percentages, I want to encourage you always to convert to the same thing. And that might be a decimal, it might be a fraction, but more often than not it's going to be a percentage. When they are all equivalent, you can compare them. So when we've looked at comparing fractions and ordering them, we've done it when the bottoms have been the same. The reason that percentages work in terms of comparison is that the bottoms of our fraction are the same. They're actually out of 100. So a percentage is already out of 100. So it gives us that kind of edge. We can do that already. And again, comparing decimals and ordering decimals are by nature out of 10 or 100 or 1,000. So we can really sort of hone in on these skills now and start to understand a bit more about fractions, decimals and percents and how they're all linked. Read the question carefully with these sorts of ordering questions. Make sure that you don't do it the wrong way round. If you've done all the hard work, there's no point in being silly and then writing down the question if it says highest to lowest. If you write down lowest to highest, you're going to lose marks, and that's silly. And you might want to give yourself a quick example where we've got something like, I don't know, let's go with 4/5. How would we convert that into a decimal and a percent? Well, first of all, let's write it out over 10. So it's the same as doubling the bottom, which means doubling the top. Now I've got 8 in my tenths column, so 0.8. Let's turn it into a percentage. That means doing it over 100, which means multiplying by 10, which means I've got 80 out of 100, which is the same as 80%. Okay, hopefully you found this video useful. I'm getting more and more subscribers on YouTube, which I'm really pleased about. Hopefully these videos are being good for your confidence, and I'm as ever, keeping my fingers crossed that you're going to do really well in your exams. So if you need anything, get in touch. If not, I'll see you around. Bye.